I wanted to talk about the demise of the front end engineer job. A lot of times when you're looking for jobs, you might find a back end engineer, a full stack engineer, but I don't really see too many front end engineer jobs honestly being posted anymore. It used to be where knowing HTML, JavaScript to some degree, and CSS could land you a potential front end engineer position. Honestly, that's not really the case anymore. Unfortunately, I think everything is kind of being funneled through what's called the full stack engineer. And that umbrella of technologies included in the full stack engineer is only expanding. For me, the list of technologies that I'm going to iterate through in a second has only gotten larger. And I've been doing this for over 5 years professionally. Personally, has been since middle school. But the list of technologies that I have to know to maintain the current job that I have now and the previous job basically includes cloud technologies, so AWS, Azure, and then there's some deployment technologies that go with that. Um, the actual programming languages that are included in that, I have to know C Sharp, JavaScript, and then with JavaScript, I have to know various frameworks like React, Angular, and then just vanilla JavaScript. I have to be familiar with React Native code, which is the mobile development language similar to React. I have to know native Android, so just Java or Kotlin. And I have to be familiar with how to at least read Java backend services to kind of work through the code and potentially have to accommodate for an existing system. And then aside from that, I have to know deployment strategies. So you have to know basically YAML, which is literally yet another markup language, is like the full term for what a YAML file is. But basically, it's like a configuration file that you can specify deployment pipelines with. So GitHub Actions and everything like that. I also have to know general XML for configurations of either systems or older versions of .NET applications. And in terms of actual development frameworks, I have to know .NET, which everything is kind of built into, if that makes sense. There's a ton more, but that's just kind of broadly what technologies go into the day-to-day job as a full stack engineer, at least for me. And honestly, that doesn't even include database technologies. So you obviously have to know SQL, but then you have to know different types of SQL depending on what the database you're using is. So whether it's MySQL, SQLite, Postgres. So that's the growing list of technologies that at least I have to know. But I don't see anywhere where a full stack, or sorry, where a front end engineer would fit into that. Front end engineers historically have primarily been focused on front end frameworks, right? So it might be some light React or JavaScript code, but it's heavily CSS and HTML to make sure that the web page is structured in a way where it can be then sent off to the backend engineer to, create the backend endpoint or the API, whatever it is. But honestly, I think the front end engineer job, in my opinion, is dying out, and I think it's being replaced with a full stack engineer position. And full stack engineer position comes with a lot of assumptions of knowledge about CSS, HTML, and basically, honestly, every front end framework that you can think of. Not to mention a lot of like the front end style frameworks that you're kind of expected to know. So there's some like Material UI is super popular. So if you've ever worked with that, but that's not really just like a pick up and just use kind of thing. Like, yeah, you can do that, but it's going to only get you so far. Now, somebody who's that's all they do is front end design and works with CSS and HTML, they're going to be able to do it way better just because that's their primary focus. They can specialize in that. Whereas a back end engineer, like how I would approach it, is okay, what's the fastest, quickest way that I can get this UI element on the front end to work and look acceptable. But once it's done, I don't really like to get into it, further. And the last thing I want to have to do is manually edit, all the CSS values to like get something to look right on the front end. It's just not really my thing. And honestly, I would be challenged to find somebody who now just acutely specializes in CSS who also is a back end or full stack engineer. It's just from what I've found, typically is CSS seems to be like you use it when you have to kind of thing. And I think it's unfortunate because CSS is really powerful and you can make some incredible graphics in front end elements with that. Um, and so I truthfully, in my opinion, I think the front end engineer jobs are going to become very scarce, and if not going to be a dying uh, job. Again, in to be replaced by full stack engineers. Now, I can understand why companies may do this, right? Why hire a specific front end engineer when I can hire a full stack engineer and just have them do the front end if it looks acceptable and fine. And I understand that from the business perspective, and I understand that from the money perspective, right? Like theoretically, it's one less person you have to hire to build something, and I completely get that. But it removes, again, it removes the element of specialization. Specialization in software allows us to build really good software because it would be impossible for you to be a database specialist, a front end specialist, a back end specialist, and still be productive, if that makes sense. So it's quite challenging. But this is just what we see happening in today's economy. I don't know if any of you have seen any other like or have any other opinions or seen anything contrary to this, but I have not really seen a lot of front end engineer jobs specifically. Um, the closest that I may see today seems to fall more under the umbrella of web designer, which they may focus more on the graphics of the site, like more of like a graphics designer, to be honest. But I've only ever seen that really in the context of like a WordPress developer. So it's like they use WordPress sites and then they style everything to make it look nice. And that's a good job to have, but it's different than working in an environment where it's all custom proprietary software and you're working with a front end framework. That's really where the challenge is. And again, I don't want to say one way or the other, and I understand from a business perspective the challenges they would have in finding somebody who just specializes in front end engineering. So like because the front end, back end, the lines have gotten really blurred, between both of them, just with advances in technologies and different front end frameworks, WebAssembly, and like even if you work in .NET, like Razor, where you can use C# on the front end. So the worlds have kind of been blended into one world in a sense, and it's really the lines have really been blurred. Um, so again, I understand, but I think in the future we're only going to see a further demise of front end engineering jobs. So maybe one of you is actually specifically a front end engineer. I'd be really curious to hear what your perspective is on this matter as a whole. I've read some things talking about front end engineers, and it would seem that there is a general decline in specific job availability for that title of job in general. Um, and that brings us back to what even is a full stack engineer, and are there too many assumptions that go into what we require a full stack engineer to know? Are there a lot of assumptions? I know from my experience, there definitely were not targeted questions about CSS. There's definitely was no questions about HTML, right? That's just something, doesn't everybody know that? You can, can't you make a web page? Like that's the impression I got, and it was all focused on back end technologies. Front end was always treated like the thing that you can learn after the fact, right? You can just pick that up really fast, and that's true for some things, but some of the frameworks like React and Angular are not things that you can just like go into blindly and pick up, really quick. At least I couldn't. I have to put a lot of time and studying into learning those frameworks because React is way different in how it treats the DOM than Angular. React continually updates its virtual DOM, and that's not how, at least how I understand Angular to work. I'm not really too versed in Angular. I have to use it when I have to, but I'm much more. I like React a lot better. I'm much better at React. Um, and those two are very different. And so it's going to be tough. I think moving in the future, expecting people to know as much everything about all this stuff. It's going to be real. It's going to be real interesting. And I do wonder what the role of specialization is going to be moving forward into the future. Are there still going to be specializations? Are people still going to specialize in database? Are there even going to be dedicated database teams? What's going to happen to the database administrator role? Is that going to be a thing in the future? I don't know. That could be another topic. So let me know what your thoughts are. Is again, I'm sure there are a wide variety of experiences. This is just coming from what I've seen personally and seen on the market. So anyway, let me know your thoughts, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.